There's a distinct hush that fills a room when a vinyl record begins to spin. It isn't silence, not quite. It's the sound of attention, of presence, of a moment suspended, waiting for music to slip gently into the air. And then, softly, it comes, not with flash or force, but with warmth. A voice, a melody, a memory pressed into wax and time. Tonight, we'll explore a question that has quietly grown louder in recent years. What's behind vinyl's comeback? In an age of streaming and digital abundance, where music is endless and always within reach, why have so many turned back to something slower, heavier, and quieter? What is it about this old invention, a disc of grooves, a needle that traces sound, that continues to charm listeners across generations? Welcome to Sleepy Journeys, the podcast designed to lull you into a peaceful slumber with soothing stories through time, places, and ideas. Whether you're winding down after a long day or simply looking for a peaceful escape, you're in the right place. My name's Jack, and I'm so happy to have you here with me. Each night on Sleepy Journeys, we set off together on gentle adventures designed to soothe your mind and ease you into rest. You'll find journeys through history, comforting fairy tales, myths and folklore, the wonders of science, fascinating inventions, inspiring famous figures, music history, and even calm explorations around the world. No matter where your curiosity takes you, there's a dreamy Sleepy Journeys show for you. Tonight, we're going to embark on a gentle journey through what's behind vinyl's comeback, a gentle look at its lasting charm. And just before we fully drift off, if you're enjoying Sleepy Journeys, go ahead and tap follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're joining me on. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming sleepy adventures. And let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us. Now, take a deep breath and let's begin. This story is more than a history of records. It's about something slower, something quieter. It's about why vinyl feels like home to so many, why its weight in our hands, the gentle care it asks of us, and the warmth in its sound have endured long after it was supposed to be obsolete. We'll explore where vinyl began, how it grew, when it faded, and, most of all, why it's come back. Not with a bang, but with a slow, steady hum. So close your eyes. Imagine the gentle drop of the needle, the soft spin of the turntable, the music of memory rising up to greet you once again. Long before the soft crackle of a vinyl record became a household staple, before turntables nestled into cozy living rooms, and long before music could be held in the palm of a hand, there was only the fleeting nature of sound, spoken, sung, then gone. In those earliest days, the idea of capturing a voice or a melody felt as distant as bottling sunlight. But in the quiet corners of curiosity, that idea began to form. It was the late 19th century when a man named Thomas Edison turned his inventive attention not just to light, but to sound. Surrounded by tools, wires, and the glow of oil lamps, he envisioned a machine that could record and replay human speech. Not perfectly, not musically, even, but enough to make a memory linger. In 1877, Edison created the first working phonograph. It was a simple, mechanical device, a hand-cranked cylinder covered in tinfoil, a stylus, and a diaphragm that vibrated with sound. When Edison spoke into the device, reciting "Mary Had a Little Lamb," the vibrations etched a tiny groove into the foil. Then, when played back, the stylus retraced the groove and reproduced his voice, ghost-like and faint. The sound was thin and wobbly, but unmistakable. A voice, captured and returned. A whisper from the past. People were astonished. For the first time, the ephemeral could be held. Sound was no longer bound to the moment it was made. At first, the phonograph was seen as a novelty, something for curious minds and scientific exhibitions. It didn't yet have the polish or purpose of entertainment. But it planted something deeper, a shift in how we think about time and memory. With this machine, a moment could be repeated. A message could outlive its speaker. A lullaby could be played again, long after it had been sung. There was something delicate about those first recordings, fragile tinfoil, mechanical cranks, and voices that trembled in and out of audibility. But within that fragility was wonder. A doorway had been opened. Edison's invention didn't immediately transform the world. Change came slowly, but the idea had taken root. Other inventors, thinkers, and dreamers began to refine it, replacing tinfoil with wax, improving the mechanics, softening the sound. Bit by bit, the whisper grew clearer. And though Edison likely never imagined people one day placing needle-to-groove on black vinyl discs filled with symphonies and soul music, his phonograph began the journey. It was the first step towards something more, not just the recording of sound, but the preservation of presence. A quiet whisper etched into metal, the beginning of listening again. With Edison's first phonograph came possibility, but it was the gramophone that brought that possibility into homes as a quiet companion. Inventors like Emil Berliner refined the idea, replacing cylinders with flat discs, easier to store, replicate, and play. And with that shift, sound found a new shape, a circle of grooves, spinning gently beneath the needle. The gramophone, introduced in the 1890s, was mechanical and simple in design. No electricity was needed, only a hand-wound crank, a needle, and the willingness to listen. Music was no longer fleeting. It could be replayed, shared, and, in a way, owned. For the first time, people could carry a performance home, not perfectly, but faithfully enough to stir the heart. These early discs were made of shellac, fragile, heavy, and easily cracked. They held just a few minutes of sound per side, their quality scratchy and soft. But they were remarkable. Opera arias, spoken poetry, folk tunes, and classical pieces were etched into their grooves, and listeners would gather around, leaning in to catch every note. There was something ceremonial about it, the winding of the machine, the careful placement of the needle, the quiet before the sound began. The act of listening was not passive. It was something you prepared for, created space for. You listened with attention, with patience. And that attention gave the music weight. People marveled not only at what they heard, but that they could hear it again and again. The gramophone offered a form of time travel. Voices of singers who had passed, moments that had ended, all came alive once more with each play. In a world where everything moved forward, this small invention allowed one thing to move backward, if only briefly. For many, it awakened something deeply human, a longing to hold on to what fades. A child's laughter, a beloved's voice, a favorite melody. All of it could now be preserved. Not perfectly, but enough to feel real. The groove of a record became a trace of life, like handwriting or a photograph. But unlike those, it spoke. And as gramophones became more widespread, appearing in parlors, cafes, and corner shops, so too did the desire to collect. Records became keepsakes, treasures to be shared on rainy evenings and sunlit mornings alike. Music, once locked to time and place, was now a quiet guest in the home, welcome and beloved. In these early moments, we see the heart of vinyl's lasting charm, the desire not just to hear, but to return, to listen again with care, to make sound into something we can hold. By the 1940s and 50s, the record had evolved into something smoother, lighter, and more enduring. The fragile shellac discs of the gramophone era had given way to vinyl, flexible and resilient, a new material that made listening more practical and in many ways more beautiful. And with this change came two quiet revolutions in sound, the 45 and the LP. The 45, a small 7-inch single, brought a burst of life into jukeboxes, diners, and teenage bedrooms. It held just a few minutes of music per side, typically one song, but what it offered was immediacy. Pop hits, catchy hooks, and danceable rhythms spun from these tiny records, their colorful labels glowing under soft lights. They were affordable, easy to collect, and shared among friends like postcards from a musical world. Then there was the LP, the long-playing record. At 12 inches, it offered more time per side, allowing entire symphonies, jazz suites, or a dozen songs to unfold in one continuous listening session. For the first time, an album could be more than a collection of tracks. It could be a narrative, a journey, a carefully crafted experience. The vinyl format itself brought improvements in sound. With slower speeds and tighter grooves, these records could hold more music with greater fidelity. The warmth, the subtle hiss, the fullness of tones all became part of the experience. Unlike earlier records, these didn't just preserve music. They presented it as something to be absorbed. In homes across the world, record players found their way into living rooms and bedrooms, often housed in polished wooden consoles or sleek mid-century cabinets. Listening became a ritual. The process was deliberate, selecting the album, opening its cover, placing the record on the turntable, lowering the stylus with care. Each motion held intention. Families gathered to listen. Teenagers found identity in their collections. Couples played music during dinners, during quiet evenings, during slow Sunday mornings. Vinyl brought music into the everyday, not as background noise, but as company. A trusted voice, a welcome guest. This, too, is part of what vinyl continues to offer, an invitation to return to a slower pace. Unlike streaming, which skips and shuffles, vinyl asks you to stay a while, to let the music play through, to flip the side, To listen, not in passing, but with presence. The 45 brought moments. The LP brought experiences. And both, in their own ways, helped shape not just what we listened to, but how we listened, carefully, closely, and with a little more heart. As the LP format matured, so too did the ways artists used it. No longer limited to isolated songs, musicians began to think in terms of full albums, collections of tracks that flowed into one another, creating something richer than the sum of their parts. Albums became like quiet novels, unfolding scene by scene, side by side. For listeners, they offered not just entertainment, but immersion. The vinyl record, with its two sides and physical structure, encouraged this kind of storytelling. You couldn't shuffle. You couldn't skip. You followed the journey as it was laid out, a gentle unfolding. Albums like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles and Blue by Joni Mitchell offered more than melodies. They offered moods, memories, inner weather. To listen was to enter a space, a place of atmosphere. A well-sequenced album could evoke entire landscapes of feeling. The swell of the first track, the hush before the last, these weren't random. They were designed with intention, and vinyl preserved that intention perfectly. Part of the album's emotional resonance came from the way it asked you to slow down. You couldn't simply scroll or tap. You had to choose the record, hold it in your hands, place it with care. That physicality, the weight of the disc, the texture of the cover, grounded the experience. You felt the music before you even heard it. And then there were the moments in between. The brief silence as the needle approached the first groove. The whisper of the record's edge spinning beneath the tone arm. The soft click as the side ended, inviting you to rise, walk over, and flip the disc. These interruptions were not distractions. They were part of the ritual, gentle reminders that you were present. Listeners formed relationships with their albums. Certain records became companions for rainy days. Others were reserved for late nights, heartbreaks, celebrations. To pull an album from its sleeve was to return to a familiar story, one you knew by heart, yet always felt slightly different with each listen. This kind of attentive listening, where each track led softly into the next, where each side offered a distinct mood, is part of what has drawn so many back to vinyl. In a time of playlists and algorithms, the album remains a curated space of emotion. A space that invites you in and asks you to stay. Vinyl, in this way, becomes more than format. It becomes canvas. A place where music breathes, lingers, and lives, not in bits and bytes, but in grooves and ghosts and memory. In a world where most music now flows invisibly through the air, streamed, stored, summoned with a touch, vinyl offers something different. Something you can hold. Its presence is undeniable. A 12-inch disc, circular and solid, its black surface etched with invisible lines of sound. To hold a record is to hold music itself, not just as data, but as object. This tangibility does more than satisfy nostalgia. It fulfills something psychological. Studies in recent years have shown that people form deeper emotional attachments to physical media than to digital files. A song on a streaming playlist is fleeting. A record on your shelf is a commitment to memory, to mood, to the moment it represents. You remember where you bought it, when you listened to it. Who was there? The object becomes a keeper of context. There's also trust in the physical. A record doesn't vanish behind a subscription or glitch. You don't need updates, passwords, or battery life. It waits for you, quietly, faithfully. If you care for it, it lasts. There's comfort in that, a steadiness that feels rare today. And then, there's the act of care itself. Vinyl asks you to touch gently, to hold by the edges, to lower the needle with attention. Each play is a physical ritual, one that slows the pace, quiets the mind, and fosters mindfulness. The care you give the record becomes part of the listening experience. You're not just consuming. You're tending. You're participating. Collectors speak often of the joy of crate digging, flipping through bins of old records, the cardboard sleeves soft with age, the handwritten prices, the occasional surprise find. There's something grounding about the search. Music is discovered not through a screen, but with your hands. Even new records, freshly pressed, retain this aura of material meaning. The smooth shrink wrap, the weight of the vinyl inside, the sharp corners of the cover, it feels intentional, crafted. You open it slowly. You listen deliberately. And for many, especially younger listeners who grew up in the digital era, vinyl's tangibility offers a kind of anchoring. In a fast, flickering world, here is something still, something real. It doesn't demand attention the way a phone does. It invites it. To hold music is to respect it, to slow down for it, to treat it not as background noise, but as something worthy of time and space. And perhaps that's part of what's behind vinyl's return, the need to feel something in our hands, in our hearts, and to know it won't disappear with a swipe. Long before screens filled with thumbnails and scrolling playlists, music arrived in full color, not just in sound, but in sight and story. The album cover was more than packaging. It was a doorway, a glimpse into the world the music held inside. And for vinyl listeners, this visual element became as cherished as the music itself. A record sleeve is a canvas. At 12 inches square, it invites expansive design, bold typography, surreal illustrations, candid portraits, or carefully staged symbolism. Whether minimal or ornate, each cover carried a mood. And before the record ever played, that mood began to settle in. Some albums became known as much for their art as their sound. Think of the prism on the dark side of the moon, the banana on the Velvet Underground and Nico, or the sea of flowers on Sgt. Pepper's. These images didn't just illustrate the music, they deepened it. They gave it a face, a story, a texture. For listeners, album art became a memory cue. Years later, one glance at a cover could recall an entire season of life, a summer, a road trip, a heartbreak. It became part of the emotional landscape vinyl helped create. And inside those sleeves, tucked into folded inserts or printed on the back, were the liner notes, the often overlooked texts that spoke directly to the listener. Lyrics printed like poems. Personal messages from the band. Details about who played what, where it was recorded, and why it mattered. Reading liner notes was like being invited behind the curtain. You learned who arranged the strings, what inspired a particular song, how the album came to be. It was storytelling besides storytelling, music explained, or at least shared, in words. Even now, decades later, collectors often speak of the quiet joy found in these little extras. The smell of the ink, the weight of the insert, the unfolding of a gatefold sleeve to reveal unexpected photos or handwritten scribbles. These were not disposable. They were part of the whole. And then there's ownership. To own a record is not just to stream a track or borrow a moment. It's to have it, in your space, in your care. It's yours to play, to shelve, to pass down. In the digital age, where access has replaced possession, vinyl reintroduces the pleasure of keeping something close. This sense of ownership is part of the appeal. The music becomes part of your world, not floating in the cloud, but held in your home. It's a quiet kind of pride, a reflection of taste, of history, of memory. Vinyl reminds us that music is not only meant to be heard, it's meant to be seen, held, and kept, not just for now, but for always. By the 1980s, the soft crackle of the turntable began to fade from everyday life. The world was changing, moving faster, growing smaller, seeking convenience in every corner. New technologies arrived, and with them, new ways to listen. First came the cassette tape, then the compact disc. And slowly, vinyl, once the heart of home listening, began to fall quiet. Cassette tapes brought portability. Music could travel with you, in the car, in a pocket, on a morning jog. The tape hissed, but it offered freedom. You could rewind, fast forward, make your own mix. It felt modern, adaptable. Then, in the 1980s and 90s, the compact disc took hold. CDs were small, shiny, and durable. They didn't scratch easily. They promised perfect sound forever, a slogan that echoed through electronic stores and home stereo ads. There were no skips, no need to flip sides. Just crisp sound at the push of a button. Digital began to rise. Music became something you could encode, compress, and copy. Files replaced formats. The warmth of analog gave way to the clarity of data. And for many, it was enough. Vinyl, once the centerpiece of music libraries, was tucked away. Record shops closed. Pressing plants shut down. The act of placing a needle on a record began to feel old-fashioned, a relic of an earlier time. LPs gathered dust in basements and attics, traded at yard sales, sold for $1 apiece. But even in that quiet, something endured. Some listeners never stopped. They didn't speak out against CDs or new formats, but simply missed something that had been lost. The depth of sound, the sense of occasion, the ritual. They described digital as convenient, but cold. Precise, but distant. And the music itself had changed, too. In the push toward digital compression, dynamics were flattened. Loudness was favored over nuance. Tracks were designed to catch attention, not to linger. For many, listening became passive, a backdrop to daily life rather than an experience in itself. Vinyl, in contrast, had always required more. More time, more space, more care. And in that, it had given more back. Still, for a time, it remained in the background, a hum beneath the digital wave. Some labels kept pressing records in small quantities. Audiophiles kept collecting. DJs held onto their crates. And quietly, like a melody remembered in sleep, vinyl waited. It wasn't gone. It was simply paused, a groove waiting to be played again. And what no one expected was that it would be. As vinyl stepped quietly off the stage and digital formats rose to take its place, something subtle happened, not all at once, but gradually, and mostly without notice. The way people listened began to change. With streaming and digital libraries came abundance, millions of songs available instantly, anytime, anywhere. What once required effort and intention now came effortlessly. Music became lighter, more convenient. It floated through earbuds on commutes, filled the background of workplaces, accompanied workouts and chores. It was always on, always accessible. But in this shift, something older and softer began to recede, the act of intentional listening. Vinyl had asked for attention. It required a space, a room with a turntable, a comfortable seat, a bit of time. It asked you to sit, to listen through a whole side, to be there with the music as it unfolded. You couldn't skip easily. You couldn't shuffle. You stayed with it, even if only for 20 minutes. Digital, in contrast, allowed everything and asked for almost nothing. Songs could be started and stopped without thought. Playlists mixed genres and moods without context. Albums were often split apart and never heard as a whole. The physicality was gone, and with it, some of the presence. This shift wasn't wrong. It made music available to more people, more often. It brought forgotten songs back to light. But it also made it easier to tune out, even as we were listening. Many listeners found themselves skipping more than staying, letting music fade into background noise rather than inviting it in. The ritual of listening became rare. And yet, in quiet ways, that absence was felt. Some missed the feeling of flipping through records. Others longed for the richness of sound or the stillness that used to surround a listening session. They didn't just miss vinyl. They missed the experience of listening with care, with focus, with reverence. There were fewer liner notes to read, fewer covers to admire, fewer reasons to pause and say, "This is what I'm going to listen to tonight," and then really listen. In that silence, a kind of longing returned. Not loudly, not with protest, but softly, like a memory you realize you've missed only when it brushes past you again. The comeback of vinyl, in many ways, began here, in the absence of that connection. In the quiet desire to listen slowly again, to hold music gently, to remember what it feels like to let a song fill the room, and stay. What faded in the digital age wasn't just a format. It was a rhythm, a ritual, a way of being with sound that asked us not just to hear, but to feel. Vinyl's return did not arrive like a revival concert. It arrived like a memory, soft, persistent, familiar. And for many, the reason was simple. In a world growing more digital, more compressed, more fleeting, vinyl offered something warm, something real. Listeners began to notice that something was missing from the music they streamed, not the notes, but the feeling. Digital sound is clean, efficient, and technically precise. But in its perfection, it can also feel distant. The tiny fluctuations that exist in analog recordings, the texture, the imperfection, the breath, were gone. Vinyl, with its analog grooves, brought those textures back. When a needle moves through the groove of a record, it doesn't read not a file, but a continuous wave, a sound captured in its natural shape. The result is something richer, fuller, warmer. Not always cleaner, but somehow closer. The crackle before the first note, the hum beneath the music, the slight wobble at the edge, these are not flaws. They are part of the experience. For some, it wasn't just about fidelity, it was about feel. Vinyl didn't just sound warmer. It felt warmer. It slowed things down. It made music feel human again. This warmth became more valuable as the digital world grew louder. We scroll, we swipe, we consume. We move quickly from one thing to the next. But vinyl, quietly, offered an alternative. A place to stop. A place to listen. Record stores, once shuttered or sparse, began to reopen. Not in fanfare, but in community. Small shops with wooden bins and handwritten labels. Young people digging through crates for Bowie, for Björk, for something they hadn't heard but wanted to feel. The comeback was not driven by nostalgia alone. It was driven by discovery. New artists began releasing albums on vinyl again. Not just reissues of classics, but brand new records, pressed fresh, sleeves designed with care, lyrics printed in full. It wasn't about chasing the past. It was about bringing physical connection back into the present. Collectors and casual listeners alike spoke of the joy of ownership, of placing a new record on the shelf, of playing an album from start to finish with no interruptions, of hearing the room fill with sound that wasn't streamed but played. And perhaps most beautifully, the return wasn't loud. It was steady. Year after year, more records sold. More shelves were filled. More moments were made. In a digital world, vinyl's warmth isn't just a sound. It's a feeling. A quiet reminder that music can still live outside of screens. That it can still live in the room with us, spinning gently, one groove at a time. One of the most tender reasons behind vinyl's return is not tied to sound at all. It's about time. In a world that often urges us forward, fast and without pause, vinyl gently invites us to slow down. From the moment you select a record, the ritual begins. You flip through your collection, your fingertips grazing the edges of sleeves, cardboard softened by years, colors slightly faded. You settle on one, perhaps by memory, or simply by mood. Then comes the opening, the soft crackle of the inner sleeve sliding out, the black disc glinting gently in the light. You lift it carefully, place it on the turntable, and lower the needle. The hush before the music begins feels like holding your breath. The first sound, soft, full, textured, marks the beginning of a kind of listening that asks for your presence. This process cannot be rushed, and that, in itself, is part of the charm. Each side of a record plays for around 20 minutes. It's just enough time to become immersed, and just short enough to remind you not to drift too far. When the side ends, the music stops. You must rise, walk over, and flip it. That simple action brings you back into the moment. This pacing is unlike digital, where music plays endlessly, effortlessly, and often thoughtlessly. With vinyl, you listen on purpose. The music has your attention, and in giving it, something gentle opens inside you. And then, there's rediscovery. Many who return to vinyl describe the joy of hearing songs they've known for years, but as if for the first time. There's something in the analog that reveals what digital often smooths over. A harmony, a guitar string's vibration, the room where the recording took place. These details feel new, though they were always there. Vinyl simply lets them breathe. There's also the rediscovery of albums as whole works. When you listen on vinyl, you often stay with one artist, one era, one mood. The album unfolds the way it was meant to. You notice the pacing. The quiet track that once went ignored becomes your favorite. You hear what was hidden in plain sight. For some, vinyl becomes a daily ritual, not just for music, but for stillness. A pause in the evening, a moment away from screens, a few minutes of quiet company in the form of sound. This is the heart of vinyl's comeback. Not nostalgia, not novelty, but the return of ritual. The slow, tactile, attentive act of letting music truly reach you again, with warmth, with space, with time. Long after the charts change, after formats fade and technologies evolve, vinyl continues to spin, not just as a vessel for music, but as a gentle reminder that listening itself can be an act of care. To listen to a record is to give something your full attention. It's not multitasking. It's not background. It's presence. You choose the album. You place the needle. You listen, not while doing 10 other things, but as its own experience, like brewing tea, or watching rainfall, or lighting a candle in the dark. This kind of listening is rare in today's world. We are often asked to divide our focus, to consume quickly, to move on before we've even fully absorbed what came before. Vinyl asks us to pause, to sit, to let the sound unfold slowly, track by track, side by side. In that act, we care not only for the music, but for ourselves. For many, vinyl becomes a way to mark time gently, a way to wind down at the end of a long day, to create a mood on a quiet morning, to sit with emotion, whether joy or sadness, and let the music hold it with you. It becomes ritual. It becomes company. There's also care in the physical handling. You must store your records upright, keep them clean, handle them by the edges. You learn how to brush dust from the grooves, how to set the tone arm down gently, how to wait for the turntable to spin into silence. These small acts of stewardship deepen your relationship with the sound. And when you play a record for someone else, a friend, a guest, a partner, it feels more intimate. You're not just playing music. You're sharing a piece of something personal. A record pulled from your shelf is different than a playlist shared by link. It carries meaning, memory, and care. Over time, vinyl becomes not just a collection, but a reflection of who you were, who you are, and who you've quietly become between listens. It's less about nostalgia and more about connection to the music, yes, but also to presence. In its quietest moments, vinyl reminds us that listening is not just hearing. It's noticing. It's feeling. It's honoring the space between sounds and letting those sounds take up space in our lives. That's its charm. Not loud or showy, but lasting. A softness that never really leaves. It just waits for you to return. A record turns at a steady pace, 33 1/3 or 45 revolutions per minute. Not hurried, not slow, just constant. Its rhythm is patient, measured, and certain. And in this simple motion, there is something quietly profound. A reminder that time doesn't have to race. It can circle. It can hold. It can return. When you listen to vinyl, you listen in loops. Side A ends, and side B begins. When it finishes, you flip it again, or you start something new. But always, the process invites you to move gently, to listen, to pause, and to begin again. It's a soft mirror of life's own rhythms. In our world, time often feels like a straight line, always pulling forward. But the record shows us another shape, round, repetitive, deeply rooted in return. There's comfort in that. A sense that things don't need to be rushed to matter. That presence, not pace, is what gives something weight. Records age, but they don't expire. Their grooves wear down slightly, their sleeves fray, their covers fade, but they still play. And often, they play with more meaning. A scratch becomes a memory. A scuff tells a story. In this way, vinyl teaches us to embrace imperfection, to find beauty not in flawless sound, but in the history that lives inside it. It also reminds us of how we used to listen. Not to everything, all the time, but to one thing, fully. With both ears, with stillness, with intention. It teaches patience. Side A can't be rushed. Side B won't play until you lift the needle and turn it yourself. These quiet pauses become part of the music, part of the experience. And perhaps most gently, a record teaches us about care across time. How a song first heard in youth can sound different decades later. How we grow and the music grows with us. The notes don't change, but we do. And somehow, the grooves remember. Vinyl's lasting charm is not just about nostalgia or sound quality. It's about rhythm, memory, the rituals that slow us down, the feelings that return with a single chord. A record is time, captured and replayed. Like a story told again, softer with each telling, deeper with each listen. And as the final track fades, and the needle rises with a gentle click, you're reminded that endings aren't always the end. They're pauses. They're rests. They're chances to begin again when you're ready. Just as a record always waits to be played once more. And now, as our story spins to its end, let's return to the soft hum of a turntable, the gentle rhythm of vinyl turning beneath a needle, and the quiet comfort of sound held in something you can touch. Vinyl's story is not one of revolution, but of return, not with urgency, but with grace. Through each chapter, from the first captured whisper to the golden age of albums, Through its long silence and tender revival, it has offered something more than just music. It has offered presence. Perhaps that's what we long for most, the feeling of being rooted in a moment, of choosing a record, setting it to play, and letting the room fill with warmth. The kind of warmth that doesn't demand attention, but receives it gently. That asks nothing more than for you to sit, to listen, and to be. And so, as you drift into sleep tonight, you might imagine your favorite record resting on a turntable nearby. You might hear the soft crackle before the first note. You might feel the slight vibration of the speakers, the hush between songs, the familiar comfort of a melody long loved. Let it play in your mind gently, like a lullaby remembered from long ago. Let the rhythm slow your breath. Let the memory soften your thoughts. In this quiet space, vinyl becomes more than invention. It becomes a reminder that beauty can be slow, that listening can be sacred, and that the things we hold carefully tend to last the longest. Whether you're new to records or surrounded by shelves of them, their charm lies not in the format, but in the feeling. A record doesn't just play music, it offers time and space and presence. It gives you a reason to pause, to feel, to return. So tonight, may you rest like a record returning to its sleeve, gently, slowly, peacefully. May the songs you've loved keep playing softly in your heart. And may the quiet spaces between the notes bring you calm, comfort, and stillness. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey. I hope it brought you a little peace, a little wonder, and a little closer to rest. Until next time, sweet dreams.